Well, hello again, and welcome back to another Austin's American Flyer. Today is kind of a retrospect, but also forward-looking, as well as confessional. It's a cornucopia of things. First of all, behind me is a Hudson. It's a 322 AC, and this happens to be the first engine that I think I ever featured on this YouTube channel. It was a heavy repair. It was one that I had picked up, and it was literally sitting in water when I got it. Needless to say, it didn't run, and it took some major work to get it going. But it's been a faithful puller since then. Smokes good, chuffs good, and it's been a great thing to have. And as most of you probably would agree, the Hudson is one of the best looking engines Flyer ever made, and I would probably say their best looking steam engine. Of course, that's my opinion. But it's also interesting that here we have this fantastic Hudson, and then we also have one of the action accessories. Well, technically three, and you might even hear a fourth at work here. We have the flashing highway flashers. We have the gate. And what you're hearing a little bit in the background is another one of these with the bell in it. And once again, it's just cool what Flyer was able to do. And I have to confess, I'm a little jealous of those of you that had a childhood that maybe happened in the 40s, maybe happened in the 50s, early 60s, when Flyer was still making things, when trains were the equivalent of the modern iPhones or video games or whatever. Everyone had them, or everyone wanted them. They were the thing. And I can't quite imagine what it would have been like to live in those days, but I dream, and have been very fortunate to encounter so many of you that have shared little bits of your stories with me. And that's our segue for today. So today, I wanted to, with that long segue, I wanted to get to our next candidate. And in this video, and this is something that I do when I do a repair for someone, is I will kind of do a video, a log, or a blog, or a vlog of what's going on, what I've discovered about the particular piece of equipment in question, and then the steps that I'm moving through to fix whatever's wrong, and then the rail test at the end. And that is something that I send as a private viewing to the person, the owner of this particular engine, or whenever I do this kind of repair. And usually then I'll take some clips of that and put it into something else so that others can see, an engine running that you don't necessarily have, but it's neat to see things that you don't have, right? In today's video, the gentleman sent me a 301. 301 is in some ways a Humboldt Atlantic, but it's also kind of cool because this Humboldt Atlantic is from the original owner, and it's only got a chuff, so no smoke with it. And I think it's got some interesting things about it that you'll find me working on. And then I love how this engine turned out. It truly is a piece of art that happens to be functional. So I invite you to stick around today and join me for this little bit of pulling back the curtain in a repair project with some neat results today on Austin's American Flyer. Don't want to miss it. Hi Phil, wanted to just show you a couple things while I have the engine apart. This space rack here, you can see behind the shaft of the armature and the brush plate. When, let's see, the engine is going in forward right now. Low speed's not a big deal, but as soon as we go to higher speeds, see what's going on. So this is why a couple things are important. It's why the canisters that have the springs and brushes in them, that needs to be able to move back and forth. just to absorb that. The other thing is the gap's pretty good, so I'm going to put some spacer washers in there. I mean, it should move a little bit, but that's maybe too much. The other thing I did is I added a oil wick. That's this foam, or not foam, but lint-like thing here, and the oil wick. So that piece of felt looking stuff, you noticed how it just, if I pushed it in, you saw something push up against the back of the armature. Well, there's a bushing in the back of that brush plate, and that bushing is a piece of brass, and it was loose. And so I put a dab of super glue in there. That was rigid, and then the oil wick would stay after I did that. So that's, again, I just thought I'd touch on that a little bit. It's pregnated with oil. Now, it doesn't want to stay in there, so if it doesn't do a better job of sticking in there, it may, I don't know, it might not quite be the right size for some reason. I've never had one that didn't fit right, so I don't know what's going on there. So that may or may not go with this. If it's going to fall out, then I'm not going to bother. And then I'll just go ahead and turn the engine around, because later on, once I do a rail test, you won't be able to see this, but sorry about the lighting. But you can see, oh, good grief. There we go. So I added a piece of brass down there. Then I added a tiny one there, and then I added one more, which is pretty much covered up there. So at some point during the life of this engine, the brush plate, which is the piece at the back of the motor, fractured. I don't know if it was dropped. I don't know the story. However, somehow it fractured, and the owner discovered this, and he's very handy, and so he put some epoxy on this fracture to kind of keep things together. And during the course of my investigation of his engine, I noticed that his repair, while an excellent attempt, was not very rigid. In fact, I was concerned because the brush plate really was barely held together, and it moved a lot. So what I decided to do was add some rigidity to it, hence the tiny bits of brass that you saw, and another layer of epoxy. And epoxy is a great product. The challenge with it is, though, it's always in two parts, and depending what kind you get and how you dole out, if it's a two-part, how you dole those out and mix them, it's possible that your epoxy won't harden. And I suspect that maybe that's what happened in the case of this owner, because the epoxy was still pretty soft. So I applied some stuff, and it's not moving now. So that's a backstory about my repair that I mentioned. There's actually 3 little pieces of brass, and I ended up kind of just going over the whole joint with a light amount of epoxy, just because why is it focusing on the wrong stuff? Because it didn't seem to be setting up very hard. It was still moving. It doesn't now. Another thing I did is I cleaned with soap and water the shells. The tender shell is still drying, but maybe it's not a big deal to you, but I wasn't okay with the amount of grime and grit on these things. I'm still going to polish the whistle and the bell. Whether or not you care about such things, when it leaves here, I want it to be in just the best condition I possibly can get it for you, without kind of going over the top and getting into the neurotic zone. I'll stop myself from going into that zone. But anyhow, just wanted to let you know where things are at the moment. So I'm going to take the engine back apart, add some thrust washers, put everything back together. Then it'll be time to reassemble and then do a rail test, which I will videotape for you, and I'll include this as well. All right, thanks. Hi Phil, it's me again. I wanted to let you know got the engine cleaned up pretty nicely there, and put back together. When I started working on the tender, found a little bit of rust. I'm a little surprised because I would have said these wheels are brass, but they're rusted. And the axles are a little bit corroded. So I actually have taken the wheels apart, and I'm drumling everything, cleaning up the rust, polishing everything up. So, and then after I get all that done, I'm actually putting some of this Molly coat. There it is, Molly coat. It's a food grade lightweight grease, and I just actually dab it in the journal boxes and then put the axles back in. So should never have to do that again, probably for rest of the time, years you run this thing. So anyhow, just want to give you a quick update on some of the progress.